Continuing this thought process, we haven't said what the 10 solutions are yet. We will get there. But the team of the University of California experts arranged these pathways into 6 clusters. Okay, there is a science pathway to solutions, many science pathways to solution, societal transformation solutions. This turns out to be probably more difficult than science, even though adopting science solutions is not straightforward either. Governance solutions, as we've discussed a little bit before, the elections in many places, especially the US, show the difficulty of bringing climate change into governance. If the winner actually gets to rule, then he will try, but he will face lots of opposition, right? Good news is there. Local levels, there are examples being set, what are called living laboratories, and we'll see that concept as well. And how to build the local solutions into a global structure is what needs to be thought about, and seems quite possible, being optimistic. And there are market and regulation-based solutions as one of the clusters. There are debates about whether market-based solutions can bring us out of climate change problem, because they're the ones which caused it in the first place. But again, that's a question of what motivates people to act. Just regulations will not do it, but just market-based solutions will not be necessarily all good either. We can talk about some examples. Technology-based solutions, that's different than science pathways, we will see that. Natural and managed ecosystem solutions, there are plenty of those, and many have been tried already, and there is a lot of scope for them becoming part of the scalable solutions. Remember, everything has to be able to reduce emissions at the global level. Global warming doesn't affect everybody the same way. Sea level rise doesn't affect everybody the same way, but local solutions must add up to a global bending of the curve. Right? That's the paradigm we want to use. The other thing we have to worry about, we already talked about climate displacement, climate disparities, climate impacts being not equal. There is also the intra-generational and intergenerational equity issues. This is a nice paper that came out in Nature that talks about generational equity can help to prevent climate change and extinction. Why? Because intragenerational rights to a healthy environment are protected by the Constitution of 74% of the world's nations. Already built into the Constitution are thoughts about intragenerational rights to healthy environment. These explicit commitments and similar ancient principles of sovereign public trust are often overlooked. But if enforced, they offer sustainable protection for the biosphere. Of course, regulations and their implementation, enforcement are still critical. For example, the sustainability development that came out of the Brundtland Conference and then got adopted first into the UN says sustainability is the ability of one generation to exploit the resources, shared commons, like water, pasture, air, without jeopardizing the ability of the future generation to exploit the same resources. That sounds absolutely true, and it is true, but how do you convert that into regulations, limits, norms, and punishments? Elinor Ostrom, the Nobel laureate who passed away, has done incredible work on that and has written very well about how that can be done. That work continues still in various places. So this is from the same Nature, Ecology and Evolution paper, showing the global map in terms of percentage of total human population with various colors. You know where the crowded places are, right? And where the not so crowded places are. And then you look at the express constitutional provisions protecting the environment. Those are also color coded here. Substantive or procedural rights, government duty as implemented in the coded into the constitution of these countries, personal duty, no explicit mention. You can see Australia and US stand out. And no data. Okay, so that means that no new regulations need to be evolved. If we just implement what exists, then we can already get to sustainability and bending the curve. Okay, we are mixing the two. Bending the curve is specifically about mitigation and focusing on emissions and global warming, where sustainability is broader and includes resources, access, quantity, quality, and so on. Okay, this is looking at the intragenerational equity and intergenerational equity. Intergeneration, of course, is from one generation to the next, so they are separated by time in some sense. Intragenerational is the same generation separated by space or socioeconomics. Okay, so there are mandates on social well-being, so empowerment, social issues, if you will, empowerment, governance, inclusion, consultation, institutions, and values, and they are related to how the environment gets affected in terms of resilience, biodiversity, natural resources, and pollution. These obviously interact with values and culture, as we talked about in the context of what is constitutionally mandated. So that affects intergenerational equity. If you are now having children who will grow up in the future, how do you worry about a clean environment for them when they grow up? That's the intergenerational equity issue. Then there are economic concerns about growth, efficiency, stability, and so on. That interacts with the social mandates through intragenerational equity, basic needs, and livelihoods. So those are the disparities that we talked about before. Okay, so this is kind of a phase map where valuation, internalization, incidence of impacts, and so on relate the economic activities to environmental activities, right? Again, to mention economists like Herman Daly or Bill Nordhaus and so on, Naomi Klein, people who worry about economic aspects of environmental degradation and so on. They all kind of encompass poverty, equity, and sustainability. So this is where bending the curve has to kind of bring it all together. Okay, seems fairly obvious, but we have to be careful on how they are implemented and how they actually provide intragenerational and intergenerational equities while also bending the curve, also saving biodiversity, also saving other species, reducing sea level rise impacts, crop yields, and so on. So the solutions, again, will focus on mitigation, but you cannot separate them from economic and social mandates as well.